"What are you doing in my office?" The deep, cold voice cut through the silence like a blade. Arya froze mid-spin, her small body trembling as she faced the tall man in the expensive suit. The same face from the photograph on the desk, the same piercing blue eyes that had haunted her dreams since she was little. "I got lost," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the massive office high above New York City. The charity event's music echoed faintly from floors below, but up here it was just her and this intimidating stranger who felt oddly familiar. David Harrison stood in the doorway, his jaw tight with annoyance. He'd come back to grab important papers, not to find a lost child dancing in his private space. But something about her made him pause. Something about the way she moved, the way she looked at him with those wide, dark eyes. "The other kids are downstairs," he said, his voice softer now but still distant. "You shouldn't be here." Arya nodded quickly, but her feet wouldn't move. She kept staring at him, fragments of memories dancing in her mind like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit together. If you're someone who appreciates emotional stories, we'd love for you to like and subscribe. There's more to come that might move you too. The tension in the office was thick enough to cut with a knife. Arya's heart pounded so hard she was sure the man could hear it echoing in the massive space. David Harrison stepped closer, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished marble floor. Each step seemed to bounce off the walls of the enormous corner office, making her feel even smaller than she already did. "How did you get past security?" David asked, crossing his arms over his tailored charcoal suit. His voice was calm and controlled, but Arya could sense something underneath it. Not anger exactly, but confusion mixed with something else she couldn't quite identify. Maybe even curiosity. "There was a lady with a clipboard downstairs," Arya said quietly, wrapping her thin arms around herself. The air conditioning in the office was making her shiver, or maybe it was just nerves. She was counting all of us kids, but then someone spilled grape juice all over the snack table and everyone got mixed up. Kids were running everywhere, and the grown-ups were trying to clean up the mess. She paused, looking around the incredible office. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the glittering lights of Manhattan far below. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum, all dark wood and rich leather. Even the air smelled expensive, like cedar, and some kind of cologne she'd never smelled before. "I saw the elevator doors opening and I wanted to see what was up here. I've never been this high up in a building before." She looked down at her worn sneakers against the beautiful floor. "I'm really sorry, I know I shouldn't have come up here." David studied her face carefully. The child couldn't be more than 12, with beautiful dark skin that seemed to glow under the office's soft lighting. Her hair was pulled back in two neat braids, and despite her obvious nervousness, she held herself with surprising dignity. Her clothes were clean but clearly secondhand. A simple blue dress that was a little too big for her small frame and white sneakers that had seen better days. But what struck him most was how she moved. Even scared and trying to make herself invisible, there was something graceful about her posture, something fluid in the way she shifted her weight from foot to foot. It reminded him of someone, though he couldn't quite place who. "What's your name?" he asked, moving to lean against his massive mahogany desk. He was trying to appear less intimidating, though he wasn't sure he was succeeding. "Arya Thompson." She glanced nervously at the silver-framed photograph on his desk, a professional headshot from last year's Fortune magazine cover. "That's you in the picture, isn't it? You look younger in real life than I expected." David followed her gaze to the framed photo, surprised by her observation. "Yes, that's me. This is my office. I'm David Harrison." He gestured around the room. "I own this building, actually. The whole company." Arya's eyes widened. "The whole building? Wow. You must be really important." "Some people think so." David found himself almost smiling at her honest reaction. Most people who met him were either intimidated or trying to impress him. This child was simply curious. "Why were you dancing when I found you?" Arya's cheeks grew warm with embarrassment. "I'm sorry about that. I know I shouldn't have been touching your stuff or using your space. It's just, when I see a big open area like this, I can't help myself. Dancing makes me feel like I can fly." "Fly from what?" The question seemed to surprise her. She looked down at her feet, thinking carefully about her answer. "From being sad, I guess. From missing things I can't even remember properly. When I dance, it's like all the empty spaces inside me get filled up with music and movement instead of loneliness." David felt something twist uncomfortably in his chest. He sat down in his leather executive chair, making himself physically lower so he wouldn't tower over her. "What kind of things do you miss?" A woman who used to sing to me. She had the most beautiful voice, like honey mixed with sunshine. Arya's eyes grew distant and dreamy. She would dance around our kitchen while she cooked dinner, spinning and twirling with a wooden spoon like it was a microphone. Sometimes she'd grab my hands and we'd dance together on the linoleum floor. She paused, biting her lower lip. The social worker at the children's home told me my mama died when I was 4, so I've been in foster care ever since. Sometimes I think maybe I just dreamed all those memories, you know? Like maybe they're not real. The room fell completely silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of traffic far below. David's expensive watch ticked softly on his wrist. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the lights of New York City twinkled like scattered diamonds against black velvet. David's mind was racing, but he couldn't quite grasp why this child's story was affecting him so deeply. There was something about her that felt familiar, something that made his carefully controlled emotions stir in ways they hadn't in years. "What was your mother's name?" he found himself asking, though he wasn't sure why the question felt so important. "Lisa. Lisa Thompson." Arya looked up at him with those big, expressive brown eyes that seemed too wise for someone so young. She was a dancer too, at least that's what they told me at the group home. A professional one, I think. She performed in shows and things. David's blood turned to ice water in his veins. Lisa. The name hit him like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. Memories he'd buried deep came flooding back with stunning clarity. A beautiful woman with skin like coffee and cream. A laugh that could light up any room. Graceful movements that made his heart race. Lisa, who had danced her way into his life, and then disappeared from it 8 years ago, without explanation, without goodbye, without a trace. "Are you okay, mister?" Arya asked, taking a step closer to his desk. Her voice was full of genuine concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost or something. Did I say something wrong?" David gripped the leather arms of his chair, trying to steady himself against the wave of emotions crashing over him. "Tell me more about your mother. What did she look like? How tall was she?" "She was the most beautiful woman in the whole world." Arya's face lit up with love and pride. "She wasn't very tall. I think I'm going to be taller than her when I grow up. She had dark skin like me, but her hair was different from mine. It was longer and had these gorgeous natural curls that bounced when she moved. And she always smelled like vanilla perfume mixed with cocoa butter." Arya hugged herself, as if trying to hold on to the memory. "Sometimes at night, when I'm lying in my bed at the group home, I close my eyes really tight and try to remember that smell. It made me feel so safe, like nothing bad could ever happen as long as she was there." The description was perfect, every detail exactly right. David's hands trembled as he opened the bottom drawer of his desk, the one he kept locked and rarely touched. Buried beneath old contracts and forgotten business cards was a small wooden box he hadn't opened in years. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a single photograph. It was from 9 years ago, him and Lisa at his company's annual charity gala. They were both dressed formally, but Lisa had somehow convinced him to sneak away from the stuffy ballroom to dance alone on the empty rooftop terrace. In the picture, they were both laughing at something she'd whispered in his ear, their faces close together, her hand resting on his chest. "Is this her?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper as he held out the photograph with shaking fingers. Arya gasped so loudly it echoed in the quiet office. She rushed around the massive desk, her sneakers squeaking on the marble, and reached for the picture with both hands. "That's my mama!" Her voice cracked with emotion, tears immediately filling her eyes. "That's really, truly her. Oh my God. Why do you have her picture? Where did you get this?" David stared at the child, at Arya, seeing Lisa in every single feature. The same warm brown eyes, the same delicate bone structure, the same graceful way of moving her hands when she was excited. Even her voice had that same musical quality that had first drawn him to Lisa all those years ago. How had he not seen it immediately? "I knew your mother," he said slowly, each word feeling heavy and significant. We were very close once." "Close how?" Arya demanded, suddenly bold and fierce in a way that reminded him even more of Lisa. "Were you friends? Did you work together? Were you dating? You have to tell me everything." David looked into her eager, desperate face and realized that his entire carefully ordered world had just shifted completely off its axis. This wasn't just any lost child from tonight's charity event. This was Lisa's daughter, the daughter he'd never known existed. This was potentially his own flesh and blood standing in front of him, holding a photograph of the woman who had broken his heart and changed his life forever. The silence that followed Arya's question felt like it lasted forever. David stared at this remarkable child who might be his daughter, while she clutched the photograph of her mother like it was the most precious thing in the world. Her small fingers traced Lisa's face in the picture, and David watched tears roll down her cheeks. "Please," Arya whispered, looking up at him with desperate hope. "I've spent my whole life wondering about my mama. The people at the children's home don't know much about her. They just have a file with basic information, her name, when she died, stuff like that. But I want to know what she was really like. What made her laugh? What was her favorite song? Did she like ice cream?" David's throat felt tight. He loosened his silk tie, suddenly finding it hard to breathe. "She loved ice cream," he said quietly. "Especially chocolate chip mint. She said it reminded her of being a kid." Arya's eyes widened with wonder. "Really? That's my favorite too. The other kids at the home always think it's weird because it's green, but I love how it tastes cold and sweet at the same time. She used to buy it every Friday night, said it was her way of celebrating making it through another week." David's voice grew softer as the memories came flooding back. "Your mother she was unlike anyone I'd ever met. She had this way of finding joy in the smallest things." "Tell me more," Arya begged, moving closer to his chair. "Please, I need to know about her." David looked at this child, his child. He was becoming more certain of it every moment, and made a decision that went against every instinct he'd developed over years of being a cold, calculating businessman. She was a professional dancer when I met her. Ballet mainly, but she could do everything. Jazz, modern, even some hip-hop. He smiled slightly at the memory. "I met her at a fundraising event, actually. She was performing with a dance company that was trying to raise money for inner-city kids to take dance classes." "That sounds like something she would do," Arya said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "In my dreams about her, she was always helping other people." "The fundraiser was boring," David continued, surprising himself with how easily the words were coming. "Lots of rich people in expensive clothes talking about their money and their problems. But then the lights dimmed and she came on stage, and it was like the whole room just stopped breathing." He stood up and walked to the windows, looking out at the city lights. She moved like she was floating, like gravity didn't apply to her the same way it applied to everyone else. And when the performance ended, instead of going to the after-party like all the other performers, she sat down with some of the kids who had come to watch. "What happened next?" Arya asked, following him to the windows. "I couldn't stop watching her. She was teaching those kids some simple dance moves right there in the lobby, and they were all laughing and having the best time." David's reflection in the window looked softer than usual. I'd never seen anyone care so little about impressing the rich donors and care so much about making kids smile. "So you talked to her?" "I tried to, but she saw right through me." David almost smiled. "She took one look at my expensive suit and my serious face and said, 'Let me guess, another rich guy who thinks he can buy whatever he wants.'" Arya giggled, the first truly happy sound she'd made since he'd found her. "What did you say?" "I was so shocked that someone had called me out like that. I just stood there with my mouth open. And she laughed, this amazing musical laugh, and said, 'Well, at least you're honest about it.'" "She liked honesty," Arya said thoughtfully. "I remember that about her. She always told me that lies were like weeds. They might look okay at first, but they always end up choking out the beautiful things." David's chest tightened. That sounded exactly like something Lisa would say. She was right about that. It took me 3 weeks of calling her before she agreed to have coffee with me. 3 weeks? Why did it take so long? Because she didn't trust me. She said I was probably just another wealthy guy looking for a pretty distraction. David's voice grew quiet. She wasn't completely wrong. That's what I thought I wanted at first. But it changed. Everything changed. David turned away from the window to look at Arya directly. "Your mother taught me things I didn't even know I needed to learn. How to slow down. How to notice beautiful things that don't cost money. How to care about something besides profit margins and stock prices." Arya was hanging on every word. "How long were you together?" "About 1.5 years." David's voice grew heavy with old pain. "The happiest 1.5 years of my life. And then one day she was just gone." "Gone? How?" "I came home from work, and all her things were packed. She left a note saying she had to leave, that it was better this way, but she never explained why." David sat back down, suddenly feeling exhausted. "I hired private investigators. I called everyone we both knew. I even went to the dance studios and theaters, hoping someone had seen her. But it was like she just vanished into thin air. That must have hurt really bad, Arya said softly. It destroyed me, David admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. I'd never let anyone get that close before. After she left, I promised myself I'd never let anyone hurt me like that again. Is that why you seem so sad? Arya asked with the blunt curiosity of a child. David looked at her, startled. I don't seem sad. Yes, you do. Your eyes look sad, even when you're not crying, like you're missing something important. Arya tilted her head, studying his face. I know that look because I see it in the mirror sometimes. The simple truth of her observation hit him harder than any business rival ever had. Maybe I am missing something important, he said quietly. Do you think... Arya's voice became very small. Do you think maybe my mama left because of me? What do you mean? Well, if you two were happy and then I was born, maybe I ruined everything. Maybe she thought you wouldn't want a baby around. Tears started flowing again. Maybe if I hadn't been born, she wouldn't have had to run away. David's heart shattered. Without thinking, he knelt down in front of her chair so they were at eye level. Arya, listen to me very carefully. Nothing about you could ever ruin anything. You're smart and brave and kind, and any parent would be lucky to have you. But if she left because of me, she didn't leave because of you. I'm certain of that. David's voice was firm and sure. Your mother loved you more than anything in the world. I don't know why she left, but it wasn't because she didn't want you. How can you be so sure? David looked into her eyes, Lisa's eyes, and realized he was about to change both their lives forever. Because, Arya, I think there's something very important we need to figure out together. What? I think I might be your father. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they were ready to cross. Arya's eyes went wide, and her mouth fell open in shock. My father? She whispered. But that means your mother was pregnant when she left, and she never told me. David's voice was barely audible. It means I've spent 8 years not knowing I had a daughter. Arya stared at him for a long moment, then suddenly threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. I always wondered what it would feel like to have a real family, she whispered into his shoulder. David wrapped his arms around her small frame, and for the first time in 8 years, the cold, empty space in his chest began to feel warm. They stayed like that for several minutes, neither wanting to break the moment. Finally, Arya pulled back slightly, her eyes red from crying but brighter than they'd been all evening. If you're really my daddy, she said, testing the word carefully, then why didn't Mama tell you about me? Why did she run away? David wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I don't know, sweetheart, but I intend to find out. There has to be a reason, a good reason, why she made that choice. Maybe she was scared, Arya suggested. Sometimes when I get really scared, I run and hide too. Scared of what? Maybe she thought you wouldn't want us. Rich people and poor people don't usually stay together in the movies I've seen. Maybe she thought it would be easier to just disappear than to watch you choose your money over us. David's heart ached at the possibility. Had his wealth and status driven Lisa away? Had she thought he would abandon them both for his career? Arya, I need you to know something, he said seriously. If I had known about you, if I had even suspected you existed, nothing in this world could have kept me away. Not money, not business, nothing. Really? She asked, hope shining in her eyes. Really? You would have been the most important thing in my life. Arya smiled then, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her entire face, making her look like the happy child she should have been all along. So, what happens now? She asked. I mean, I have to go back to the group home tonight. Mrs. Patterson is probably looking for me already. David's mind was already racing with possibilities, plans, legal considerations. But looking at this child, his daughter, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Now, he said, we figure out how to be a family. The next morning came too quickly for both of them. David had barely slept, his mind racing with questions, plans, and the overwhelming reality that everything in his life had changed in a single evening. He'd spent the night making phone calls to lawyers, social workers, and private investigators, trying to understand what he needed to do to bring Arya home legally. At exactly 9 o'clock, he stood outside the Riverside Children's Home, a modest brick building in Queens that looked tired and underfunded. His black Mercedes felt out of place, parked between a rusty minivan and an old Honda with a dented bumper. He'd changed from his usual business suit into jeans and a simple white shirt, hoping to appear less intimidating, but he still felt like he stood out like a sore thumb. The director, Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. She led him into her small, cluttered office that smelled like coffee and disinfectant. "Mr. Harrison," she said, settling behind her metal desk covered in case files and paperwork. "I have to admit, your call this morning was quite unexpected. You're claiming that Aria Thompson is your biological daughter?" "I believe so, yes." David sat stiffly in the uncomfortable plastic chair across from her. "I was in a relationship with her mother, Lisa Thompson, approximately 9 years ago. She left suddenly, and I never knew she was pregnant." Mrs. Patterson opened a thick manila folder. "According to our records, Aria's father is listed as unknown on her birth certificate. Her mother died in a car accident when Aria was 4 years old. There were no known relatives, which is why she entered the foster system." "I'd like to request a DNA test," David said. "If she is my daughter, I want to petition for custody immediately." "Mr. Harrison, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but these things take time. We have protocols to follow, background checks to complete, home studies to conduct." Mrs. Patterson's voice was gentle but firm. "Even if you are her biological father, the court will need to determine if you're fit to be a parent. I understand that. But surely there's something we can do in the meantime. Some way for me to spend time with her, get to know her better? We do allow supervised visitation while the legal process is ongoing. But first, let's bring Aria in and see how she feels about all this. Sometimes children have very different reactions when they've had time to think things over." Mrs. Patterson called for Aria, and a few minutes later she appeared in the doorway. She looked smaller in the daylight, wearing a faded pink t-shirt and jeans that were too short for her growing legs. But her eyes lit up when she saw David, and she practically bounced into the room. "You came back," she said, grinning widely. "I was worried maybe I dreamed the whole thing." "I told you I would figure out how we could be a family," David said, his heart swelling at her obvious joy. "And I always keep my promises." Mrs. Patterson watched their interaction carefully. "Aria, honey, Mr. Harrison has asked for some tests to be done to see if he really is your father. How do you feel about that?" "Tests?" Aria looked worried. "What kind of tests? Will they hurt?" "Not at all," David assured her quickly. "It's just a simple cheek swab. Takes about 2 seconds and then we'll know for sure. And if the test says you're really my daddy, then what happens? Then I'll do everything in my power to bring you home with me," David said, meaning every word. Aria turned to Mrs. Patterson. "Mrs. P, is it okay if I want this? I mean, am I allowed to want to have a real family?" Mrs. Patterson's eyes grew soft. "Oh, sweetheart, of course you're allowed to want that. Every child deserves a loving family. We just need to make sure everything is done properly and safely." "So we can do the test?" Aria asked hopefully. "We can arrange for that this week," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "And in the meantime, Mr. Harrison, you're welcome to visit Aria here at the facility. We have a nice family room where you two can spend time together." For the next 2 hours, David and Aria sat in the children's home family room, a cheerful space with worn but comfortable furniture, board games, and children's books. Aria showed him a photo album she'd made of drawings and cutout pictures from magazines, representing all the things she hoped to do someday. "This is me dancing at Lincoln Center," she said, pointing to a magazine picture of a ballerina that she'd drawn her own face on. "And this is me and my family having Christmas dinner." The drawing showed stick figures around a table with a big turkey and a Christmas tree in the background. "You've never had a real Christmas?" David asked, studying the hopeful drawing. "Not really. The home tries to make it nice for all of us, but it's not the same as having your own family." Aria flipped to another page. "This is my dream house. It doesn't have to be big or fancy, just somewhere that belongs to me, you know?" The drawing showed a simple house with flowers in the front yard and curtains in the windows. What struck David most was that she'd drawn 2 figures in the doorway, a tall man and a small girl, both smiling and waving. "You drew me in the picture," he said softly. "I drew it last month, before I even met you. Isn't that weird?" Aria traced the figures with her finger. "It's like somehow I knew you were out there somewhere, looking for me too." David felt his throat tighten with emotion. Maybe some part of us always knows when we belong to someone. They spent the afternoon talking, playing board games, and simply getting to know each other. David learned that Arya was an excellent student who loved math and science, that she'd taught herself to braid hair by practicing on the other girls at the home, and that she'd never owned a pet but desperately wanted a dog. Arya learned that David had grown up poor himself, that he'd built his company from nothing, and that he'd never really wanted children before because he'd been too focused on work. "Why did work matter so much to you?" she asked as they worked together on a jigsaw puzzle. "I guess I thought if I was successful enough, rich enough, powerful enough, then I'd never have to feel small or helpless again," David said honestly. "But sitting here with you, I realize I've been missing the most important things in life." "Like what?" "Like having someone to come home to. Someone who cares if I've had a good day or a bad day. Someone to share happy moments with." He looked at her seriously. "Like having a daughter who draws pictures of us together before we even know each other exists." Arya beamed at him. "I think you're going to be a really good daddy, even if you are still learning how." "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." As the afternoon wore on, other children from the home began to drift into the family room, curious about Arya's visitor. David found himself surrounded by kids ranging in age from 6 to 16, all eager to tell him about their lives, their dreams, their hopes for families of their own. "Are you really going to adopt Arya?" asked a 10-year-old boy named Marcus. "If the tests prove I'm her father, then yes, I'm going to take her home with me," David said. "That's so cool," said a teenage girl named Jasmine. "Arya talks about having a real family all the time. She totally deserves this." "We all deserve families," said a quiet 8-year-old named Emma. David looked around at all these children, smart, funny, resilient kids who just wanted someone to love them, and felt something shift in his heart. "Yes," he said firmly. "You all deserve families." When it was time for him to leave, Arya walked him to the front door. "When will you come back?" she asked. "Tomorrow, if that's okay with Mrs. Patterson. And every day after that until we can be together for real." Arya hugged him tightly. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered. David's eyes filled with tears as he hugged her back. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know." As he drove home that evening, David's mind was spinning with everything that had happened. He called his assistant and cleared his schedule for the entire week, something he'd never done in his 15-year career. For the first time in his life, business could wait. The DNA test results came back 3 days later. David was in a meeting with his legal team when his phone rang with the call he'd been desperately waiting for. "Mr. Harrison, this is Dr. Martinez from the lab. I have your DNA results." David's heart pounded. "And? Congratulations, sir. There's a 99.9% probability that you are Arya Thompson's biological father." David closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of overwhelming joy and profound grief. Joy because Arya was truly his daughter. Grief because he'd missed the first 8 years of her life. "Thank you, doctor," he managed to say. The moment he hung up, he called Mrs. Patterson. "I'm coming over right now to tell Arya the news, and I want to start the custody proceedings immediately." "Mr. Harrison, slow down. These things take time. Mrs. Patterson, with all due respect, my daughter has spent 8 years without a family. I don't want her to spend one more day than necessary wondering if she belongs somewhere." When he arrived at the children's home, Arya was in the common room doing homework with some of the other kids. The moment she saw his face, she knew. "The test came back, didn't it?" she asked, dropping her pencil. "Yes, it did." David knelt down in front of her chair. "Arya, you are officially, scientifically, completely, my daughter." Arya threw her arms around his neck, and the entire room erupted in cheers from the other children. Even Mrs. Patterson, who was watching from the doorway, had tears in her eyes. "Does this mean I can come home with you now?" Arya asked through her tears of joy. "Soon, sweetheart. Very soon. I promise." 2 weeks later, David stood in what would soon be Arya's bedroom, directing a team of interior designers as they put the finishing touches on the space. He'd bought a penthouse apartment with an extra bedroom specifically for her, something bright and cheerful, completely different from his usual dark, minimalist style. The room was painted a soft lavender color that Arya had chosen herself during one of their daily visits. There was a white canopy bed with fairy lights strung around it, a bookshelf already filled with age-appropriate novels, and most importantly, a large open area with mirrors on one wall and a professional dance bar installed along the side. "Mr. Harrison?" His assistant, Jennifer, appeared in the doorway with a tablet in her hands. "The social worker just called. The final home inspection is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10. David nodded, running a hand through his hair nervously. Everything has to be perfect, Jennifer. This is my only chance to prove I can give Arya the home she deserves. Sir, if I may say so, I think you're overthinking this. Any child would be lucky to live here. Jennifer gestured around the beautiful room. Besides, it's clear that you and Arya have a genuine connection. That matters more than fancy furniture. Before David could respond, his phone rang. It was Mrs. Patterson from the children's home. Mr. Harrison, we have a small situation here. Arya has been in her room crying for the past hour, and she won't tell anyone what's wrong. She's asking for you. David was already grabbing his car keys. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The drive to Queens felt like it took forever. When he arrived at the children's home, Mrs. Patterson led him directly to Arya's room, a small space she shared with 2 other girls, with just enough room for 3 twin beds and a shared dresser. Arya was curled up on her bed, hugging a stuffed elephant that looked like it had been loved for many years. Her face was red and puffy from crying. Hey, sweetheart, David said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. What's going on? Mrs. Patterson said you were upset. Arya sat up and threw her arms around him, holding on tight. I'm scared, Daddy. What if I'm not good enough? What if you change your mind about wanting me? David's heart broke. Arya, honey, why would you think that? Because... She took a shaky breath. Sarah Jenkins got adopted last month. Her new family seemed really nice at first, but they brought her back after 2 weeks. They said she was too much trouble, that they weren't ready for such a damaged child. David felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice calm and gentle. First of all, you are not damaged. You are perfect exactly as you are. And second, I'm not going anywhere. You're my daughter, Arya. That's not something that changes based on convenience. But what if I mess up? What if I break something expensive in your fancy apartment? Or what if I'm too loud? Or what if I have nightmares? The words tumbled out of her in a rush. Sometimes I have bad dreams about my mama dying, and I wake up crying. What if that bothers you? David pulled her closer, his own eyes filling with tears. Sweetheart, listen to me very carefully. I don't care if you break every single thing I own. I don't care if you're loud or quiet or anything in between. And if you have nightmares, I'll be right there to hold you until they go away. Really? Really? Do you know what I was doing when Mrs. Patterson called me? Arya shook her head. I was in your new bedroom, making sure everything was perfect for you. There's a dance area with mirrors and a bar, just like you wanted. And I bought you about 50 new books because Mrs. Patterson told me you love to read. Arya's eyes widened. 50 books? All for me? All for you. And if you read all of those, we'll go buy 50 more. David wiped a tear from her cheek. Arya, I want you to understand something. I've spent the last 8 years building a successful business, making money, acquiring things. But none of that ever made me truly happy. These past 2 weeks, getting to know you, have been the best weeks of my entire life. Even better than when you made your first $1 million? David laughed. Even better than when I made my first $100 million. Because money can't hug you back. Money can't tell you jokes or show you drawings or dance with you in an empty office. Arya smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. I do tell pretty good jokes. You tell excellent jokes. Remember the one about the dancing banana? Why did the banana go to dance class? Arya giggled. Because it had appeal. See? Comedy gold. David grinned at her. Now, do you feel a little better about coming home with me? Yes, but... Can I ask you something? Anything. What about the other kids here? Marcus and Emma and Jasmine and all the others? They want families too, but nobody ever comes for them. Is it fair that I get to be happy when they're still stuck here? David was quiet for a moment, impressed by her compassion and maturity. You know what, Arya? That's a really good question, and it shows what a kind heart you have. But you can't feel guilty about being loved. The best thing you can do for your friends here is to be happy. And maybe, someday when you're older, help other kids find families too. Could we visit them sometimes, even after I move in with you? Of course we can. And maybe... David paused, an idea forming in his mind. Maybe my company could sponsor more adoption events, or help fund programs here at the home. Really? You would do that? Arya, having you in my life has already changed me in ways I never expected. I think it's time I used my resources to help other children too. Arya hugged him tightly again. I love you so much, Daddy. I can't wait to come home. Tomorrow, sweetheart. After the social worker visits and approves everything, you'll never have to sleep in this place again. You'll have your own room, your own space, and a father who will always, always want you. That evening, David returned to his penthouse and walked through every room, seeing it through Arya's eyes. The kitchen where they would cook breakfast together on Saturday mornings. The living room where they would watch movies and do homework. The terrace where she could practice her dance moves under the stars. For the first time in years, the elegant apartment felt like it could truly become a home. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Mr. Harrison, this is Jasmine from the children's home. I got your number from Mrs. P. I just wanted to say thank you for making Arya so happy. She's been glowing ever since she met you. You're going to be an amazing dad. David smiled and typed back, Thank you, Jasmine. That means more to me than you know. As he got ready for bed, David found himself looking forward to tomorrow not because of a business deal or financial opportunity, but because it was the day his daughter would finally come home. The day they would officially become a family. He fell asleep that night with a smile on his face, dreaming of a little girl with Lisa's eyes who was about to fill his life with more love and laughter than he'd ever imagined possible. The next morning arrived with nervous energy filling every corner of David's penthouse. He'd been awake since 5 a.m., double-checking every detail, making sure the refrigerator was stocked with all of Arya's favorite foods, and practicing what he would say to the social worker. At exactly 10 o'clock, there was a knock at his door. Mrs. Patterson stood in the hallway with a middle-aged woman in a professional suit carrying a clipboard and briefcase. Mr. Harrison, this is Rebecca Martinez, the social worker assigned to Arya's case, Mrs. Patterson said with an encouraging smile. Ms. Martinez, please come in, David said, trying to keep the nervousness out of his voice. Can I offer you some coffee? Water? Coffee would be wonderful, thank you, Rebecca said as she looked around the spacious living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. This is quite a beautiful home, Mr. Harrison. For the next hour, Rebecca conducted a thorough inspection of the apartment. She checked the kitchen for child safety measures, examined Arya's bedroom with its dancing space and carefully chosen furniture, and asked detailed questions about David's work schedule, childcare plans, and support system. I have to ask, Mr. Harrison, Rebecca said, as they sat in the living room reviewing paperwork. This is a significant lifestyle change for you. Are you prepared for the reality of raising a 12-year-old girl? The emotional needs, the school activities, the teenage years ahead? David took a deep breath. Ms. Martinez, 3 weeks ago, I would have said no. I was completely focused on my career, worked 16-hour days, and had never changed a diaper or helped with homework in my life. But meeting Arya, she's changed everything about how I see the world. That's lovely, but feelings can fade when faced with daily challenges. You're right to be concerned. That's why I've already made arrangements with my company. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations and promoting my very capable vice president to handle most of my responsibilities. I've also hired a wonderful nanny, Mrs. Chen, who comes highly recommended and speaks 3 languages. But most importantly, David's voice grew serious. I've realized that no business success will ever matter if I fail at being the father Arya deserves. Rebecca made notes on her clipboard. What about discipline? How do you plan to handle behavioral issues? Honestly, I have a lot to learn, but I've been reading parenting books, and Mrs. Patterson has given me some excellent advice. I believe in setting clear, consistent boundaries with love and understanding. And if I mess up, which I'm sure I will sometimes, I'll apologize and try to do better. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. That's a very mature approach, Mr. Harrison. After completing her inspection and interview, Rebecca gathered her papers. I'll have my report completed by the end of the day. Assuming everything is approved, and I see no reason why it wouldn't be, Arya can come home with you tomorrow afternoon. David felt his knees go weak with relief and joy. Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Thank you so much. After the social worker left, David immediately called the children's home. Mrs. Patterson, how did she seem to you? Do you think, Mr. Harrison, breathe, Mrs. Patterson chuckled. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen a prospective parent more thoroughly prepared or more genuinely committed. Arya is going to have a wonderful life with you. Can I talk to her? I want to tell her the good news. She's been pacing the hallway all morning, waiting for this call. A moment later, Arya's excited voice came through the phone. Daddy? How did it go? Did the lady like our apartment? She loved it, sweetheart. And if all goes well, you'll be coming home tomorrow. Arya's squeal of joy was so loud that David had to hold the phone away from his ear. In the background, he could hear other children cheering and clapping. "Daddy, I love you so much. I can't wait to be your real daughter officially." "You've been my real daughter from the moment we found each other, Arya. Tomorrow we just make it official on paper." That evening, David sat in Arya's new room, looking at the fairy lights twinkling around her bed, and felt a profound sense of completeness he'd never experienced before. Tomorrow, his daughter would finally be home. 3 months later, David stood in the wings of Lincoln Center, watching his daughter perform in her first professional dance recital. She moved across the stage like she was born to be there, every movement flowing with a natural grace she'd inherited from Lisa. The audience was mesmerized, but no one was more proud than the man who had discovered her dancing in his office that magical night. "She's incredible," whispered Mrs. Chen, the nanny who had quickly become like family to them both. "You should see your face right now, Mr. Harrison. You're glowing with pride." David couldn't stop smiling. These past 3 months had been the best of his life. Yes, there had been challenges, homework struggles, a few nightmares, and the normal adjustments that came with a 12-year-old suddenly living in a luxury penthouse. But every single day had been filled with laughter, love, and the kind of joy he'd never known existed. Arya had transformed not just his home, but his entire company culture. True to his promise, David had established the Harrison Foundation for Children, donating millions to support adoption services and foster care programs. But more than that, he'd started bringing Arya to the office sometimes, and her infectious enthusiasm had softened even the hardest hearts among his employees. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice echoed through the concert hall, "please welcome our youngest soloist, Arya Harrison, performing Dreams Take Flight." David's throat tightened with emotion as Arya glided onto the center stage. She'd chosen to take his last name officially, something that had made him cry happy tears for 20 minutes straight. She wore a beautiful white and silver costume that caught the stage lights like stardust, and in her movements, David could see echoes of Lisa's grace and passion. As the music swelled, Arya danced with her whole heart, telling a story of a young girl who refused to give up on her dreams despite all obstacles. It was her story, David realized. It was their story. When she finished, the entire audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Arya curtsied gracefully, then looked directly at David in the wings and blew him a kiss. He caught it and pressed his hand to his heart, and she giggled, breaking character completely. After the show, David waited backstage with an enormous bouquet of roses, not because she needed flowers, but because he wanted to celebrate every milestone in her life that he'd missed before. "Daddy!" Arya ran to him, still wearing her costume, her face flushed with excitement and achievement. "Did you see? Did I do okay?" "Okay?" David lifted her up in a huge hug, spinning her around. "Arya, you were absolutely magnificent. I've never been more proud of anyone in my entire life." "Really? You're not just saying that because you're my dad?" "I'm saying it because it's true. You have your mother's gift, sweetheart. She would be so incredibly proud of you." Arya's eyes filled with happy tears. "I felt like she was there with me tonight. Like she was dancing with me." "I believe she was," David said softly. "I think she's been watching over you this whole time, making sure you found your way to where you belong." As they walked through the backstage area, other performers and their families stopped to congratulate Arya. David watched with amazement as his shy little girl graciously accepted praise and made friends with dancers twice her age. She had a natural confidence on stage that spilled over into real life, and it was beautiful to see. "Mr. Harrison?" a familiar voice called out. David turned to see Rebecca Martinez, the social worker who had approved Arya's placement. "I hope you don't mind me coming tonight. Mrs. Patterson told me about Arya's performance, and I wanted to see how she was doing." "Of course. We're so glad you came," David said warmly. "Arya, come say hello to Ms. Martinez." Arya bounded over, still glowing from her performance. "Ms. Martinez, did you see me dance? It was so amazing. I felt like I was flying." "You were absolutely wonderful, honey," Rebecca said, giving Arya a hug. "And how are you liking your new home?" "It's the best thing ever," Arya exclaimed. "Daddy bought me 50 books, and we cook pancakes every Saturday morning, and he comes to all my dance classes, and we're going to Disney World next month." Rebecca looked at David with approval. "And how are you adjusting to fatherhood, Mr. Harrison?" David looked down at Arya, who was practically bouncing with excitement, then back at Rebecca. "Ms. Martinez, I spent 42 years thinking I knew what success looked like. Turns out I had no idea. Success is coming home to someone who's excited to see you. Success is helping with math homework and braiding hair and learning the names of every kid in her dance class. Success is watching your daughter discover that she can achieve anything she sets her mind to. He's the best daddy in the whole world, Arya added, hugging David's arm. And guess what? We're starting a dance program at the children's home, so kids like Marcus and Emma can learn to dance too. That's wonderful news, Rebecca said, clearly impressed. After Rebecca left, David and Arya made their way to the lobby where Mrs. Patterson was waiting with several of Arya's friends from the children's home. David had arranged for them all to attend the performance, complete with transportation and dinner afterward. "Arya," Marcus called out, "you were like a real professional up there." "Did you feel nervous?" asked Emma, eyes wide with admiration. "A little bit at first," Arya admitted. "But then I remembered what Daddy always tells me, that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared." David felt his heart swell with pride, not just for her performance, but for the wisdom and kindness she showed to her friends. As the evening wound down and they finally headed home, Arya fell asleep in the car, still wearing her costume and clutching her bouquet of roses. David looked at her peaceful face in the rearview mirror and thought about how dramatically his life had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been a cold, isolated man who measured his worth in dollars and market shares. Tonight, he was a father coming home from his daughter's dance recital, planning her birthday party, and thinking about the bedtime story he'd read to her. When they reached the penthouse, David carefully carried Arya to her room. As he tucked her into bed, she stirred slightly. "Daddy," she whispered sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Do you think Mama knows we found each other?" David brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "I think your mama orchestrated this whole thing. I think she made sure you wandered into my office that night because she knew we both needed each other." Arya smiled, her eyes drifting closed. "I love you, Daddy. Thank you for giving me the best life ever." "I love you too, Arya. Sweet dreams, my angel." As David turned off the lights and closed her door, he realized that finding Arya hadn't just given him a daughter. It had given him a purpose, a heart, and a future filled with love instead of emptiness. The cold billionaire was gone forever, replaced by a man who understood that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought, sold, or traded. They could only be shared between hearts that chose to love each other unconditionally. And as he settled into his own bed that night, David smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, and new opportunities to be the father that Arya deserved. The father he'd never known he was meant to be.